For Russian Jews, 1989 and the fall of the Soviet Union meant the end of underground Judaism. Freedom of belief and religious practice. No more refuseniks. Jews could finally come out of the Marianism they had to endure in communist Russia. Has all of this gone a big step back in 2022 with Putin's war against Ukraine? We have the privilege and the honor to discuss this with a man who has been Moscow's chief rabbi for 30 years and is now forced to live outside of Russia. Pinchas Goldschmidt, welcome to Academ.
Thank you, Ruben, for inviting me.
You are a famous personality in the Jewish and in the non-Jewish world because you are not only the chief rabbi, former chief rabbi of Moscow, but also you founded and are directing the Conference of European Rabbis, which means that you are more or less the chief rabbi of the chief rabbis. Can you tell us what's the purpose of this organization?
Okay, first of all, I would like to make a few corrections. I like to call myself the chief rabbi in exile of Moscow. I left not because I wanted to, because I had to. And number two, I didn't found the Conference of European Rabbis. The Conference of European Rabbis was founded in 1956.
Okay.
It was before I was born. I'm its fourth president. And the first president from Eastern Europe, the previous president, as you know, was the chief rabbi of France, Joseph Citruc, and the two previous presidents were the chief rabbis of England, Israel Brody and Lord Jacobowitz. So it's wonderful to be here, and responding to what you said, are we in 2022 going back to 1989? Not exactly. You see, the main issues or the main freedoms which Jews did not have in the Soviet times was A, the freedom to express themselves as Jews inside the Soviet Union, and number two, the lack of freedom of movement. Jews were not allowed to move, to leave, and with the fall of the Soviet Union, even before, I think at the end of the Gorbachev times, this changed and those two freedoms were granted.
Perestroika
and glasnost. And that's exactly when I arrived in the Soviet Union in 1989. Now, what has happened with those freedoms when the Soviet Union collapsed and the new Russian state was born? So you had basically a new constitution, a new country, and a new state, and a real democratic system. And what has happened that within the last 22 years of the current regime, those freedoms have been taken away step by step, freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and as well also religious freedom was curtailed, not with the four official religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Buddhism, which were allowed to exist.
Yes.
Other types of religion were repressed.
Which ones, for example?
Many, like the witnesses and also certain Protestant groups. And also, even though some people like to speak about a wonderful relationship between the state and the Jewish community, yes, I agree that there was a Jewish Renaissance, many synagogues were built. And
the Jewish Museum was founded by Putin.
Right. However, we don't have to forget that within the last 20 years, over 10 rabbis, almost all of the Lubavitch denomination, were expelled from Russia. And
why? What was the official reason?
So there are also reasons they pose a security danger for Russia, or they usually the FSB, which is the successor organization of the KGB, which was involved in getting rabbis being expelled from Russia. So because the whole population control is controlled by the FSB, and the borders are also controlled by them. So this also has to be taken into account. However, the freedom which was granted to Soviet citizens and to Jews and afterwards to Russia was the freedom of movement. And now, as this war is happening between Russia and Ukraine, one more thing happens. The government tells Israel to close the Jewish agency. The Jewish agency is, in fact, the vehicle of Israel to help Aliyah, help immigration to Israel. And the Russian government says, close it. By the way, this coming week, the 19th,
yes,
on Monday, there's supposed to be a court decision, the final court decision, if the Jewish agency is going to close.
Why are they doing this?
I'll respond in a very Jewish way. Why not? Meaning.
Yeah.
What we have seen since the year 2014, annexation of Crimea, when the sanction regime started, we started this very anti-Western rhetoric, right? The closing of all the international foundations, the Adenauer Foundation in Russia, the closing of the British Council, and Russia is going on an isolationist mood. So the question is, why is the Jewish agency still open? Now the response is that while this anti-Western rhetoric was going on, we would have expected also there should be anti-Semitism and anti-Israel feelings, but this, because of the, I would say, good relationship between the leaders of both countries, Israel was exempt, and the Jewish community was still kept in good graces. And this has now changed a little bit, I don't know to what extent, because of this war. Because during this war, Israel had to take a stand.
Yes.
Is Israel with the West, or is Israel with its Russian friends? And while there was no war, it was easy to be friends in Washington and Moscow. But now they
have to choose.
Actually, we are right now in the middle of World War III. The World War III is not being fought by guns and by rockets, but economically. The West is at war with Russia. Russia is at war with the West. There are no flights. There are no way. I have a friend, one of the major opposition journalists from Russia, also member of the leading member of the Jewish community. She left Russia 2 weeks ago by foot. She went over the border to Estonia. So even the only real connection between Russia and the West was with the train to Finland, which is being stopped. So if let's say you want to...
So the Iron Curtain is back.
The Iron Curtain, not only because of Russia's actions, but also because of the response of the West.
The boycott.
That's it. Yeah. In fact, there is an Iron Curtain. So the question is, do Jews want to live in a new Soviet Union?
You said in a German newspaper, radio, that Jews should leave Russia. What are you fearing?
A few things. Jews, when I'm saying what Jews should do, should not do, that's secondary. I think we should first of all look what Jews are doing. Since the war started, I'm now talking about the last 6 months, the numbers of Jews who left to Israel has been twice as high than the Jews who left Ukraine to go to Israel. We're talking about more than, I think, 22,000 new immigrants, the 35,000 people of Jewish origins in Russia who are waiting to get processed in the Israeli embassy. And besides that, you have tens of thousands of Jews in Russia who already got their Israeli citizenship before. So I think we're talking about people of Jewish origins who moved from Russia to Israel during the last 6 months. I would say the number is at least 40,000, maybe even higher.
They're fearing that bad times are coming back.
Right.
The feeling.
I would speak about the following fears. Fear number one: rising anti-Semitism. We have there has been a rise in anti-Semitism. There's been anti-Semitic voices coming out from Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, saying that Hitler is of Jewish descent, and other pearls of wisdom. We have the fear of the coming down of the Iron Curtain, whether it's de jure or de facto. Number 3, we have the worsening economic conditions. Many lost their livelihood, the perspective. 4, we have the fear of a general draft for people who are the draft age. Now with the latest great successes of Russia in Ukraine, there is a lot of talk of mobilizing the whole country. And next is the growing repression of anyone who speaks against the war. People are being jailed, people are losing their jobs. And the last reason is, people who have children, they want their children to live better than they do. They're thinking about the future, not only thinking about today, they're thinking about tomorrow. So the question is life in Russia going to be better tomorrow than today? I think nobody's going to answer this with a yes today. Even the biggest supporters of the war.
You expressed yourself against the war. That's why you left Russia now. You're in exile. What did you say?
I said this war is a catastrophe, not only for Ukraine, and not only for the Ukrainian Jewish community. It is a catastrophe and will be a catastrophe for Russia and also for the Russian Jewish community.
You're a rabbi. Did you say that because you felt that was your religious duty, a mitzvah to denounce the war? I mean, the chief of the Orthodox Church, Kirill, he did the opposite. He said more or less it's a milchemet mitzvah.
Right. I felt that, we Jews, we're very, also here in France, we're very good at criticizing other people. Oh, why during World War were you quiet? Why didn't you say a word? Where were you? The silent majority. Okay? Now, the same question is being put back to us. Can we stay quiet?
You stayed quiet for 30 years because you said freedom of speech, etc., is getting less and less. Why did you wait until now to leave, actually?
Anyway, it was, first of all, the changes in Russia have not happened from one day to the next. It has been very gradual. There were still elections and many aspects of civil life, not only religious. Religious life was booming, was with all the problems. It was still possible with all the problems. And whoever was not really part of the opposition or an active political activist was able to, I would say, to live quite well without being affected by this rising authoritarianism in regime. But on the 23rd of February, I said, I went to sleep in Moscow. In the morning, I woke up in Tehran. So it was, with all the independent media, cancelled, closed, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, blocked. The changes were so major that, and the question I'm asking myself, as chief rabbi of Moscow for 29 years, can a community thrive in such circumstances? And number 2, can a Jewish community continue to survive and live in total isolation from the rest of the world? Do Jews want to do this? Do we want to repeat?
Refuse nichts.
Right. Do we know? Do you want to go again through a new Soviet Union?
Yeah. Did you have personal relations with Vladimir Putin until the war? As chief rabbi of Moscow, I guess you met him sometimes.
We were never close, which means, by the way, in the year 2000, when there was a change of regime and Yeltsin resigned,
yes,
and Mr. Putin came to power, one of the first major changes. Till then, the Jewish community was united all together, and the president of the Jewish community, his name was Vladimir Gusinsky, happened to have been the owner of the fourth channel of NTV, which was an independent channel. And one of the first acts of the new regime was to get hold and to control television, national television. So this was done, in a very Russian effective way, and the problem was that the head of this TV station, which is the most major popular TV station in Russia, happened to have been also the president of the Jewish community, the Russian Jewish Congress. Would be like here the head of the CRIF or the Consistoire here in France. So it was necessary to create an alternative or new community instead of the community which existed. So the same day that this president of the Russian Jewish Congress was put into jail, 3 hours later, a new chief rabbi was elected, an alternative community, this Rabbi Lazar. So this...
Who is Chabad? Who's
Chabad, yeah. Created a new federation of communities which are identified. And you can imagine that our side of the community, which is Orthodox and also traditional and secular, we didn't have since any close contact with the government. We had correct relations.
So you never had a personal, private talk with Putin?
I only met 2 times. I saw him and spoke to him was when I was part of a bigger delegation. Once was of the European Jewish Congress, when I was still part, and the second time when I was with, when there were the celebration of 25 years of diplomatic relations between Israel and Russia, and the Israeli side insisted of inviting me to this event. It was not the Russian side. Right? Right.
Is this because he's so close with the Chabad? When we see pictures of Putin with rabbis, it's always with the Lubavitch rabbis. How come?
The moment that this new community was created, they were seen by the power as you are Judaism, you are the representative of Judaism, and basically nobody else exists.
They need one.
That's right. The whole idea. What is the idea of a chief rabbi?
Yeah.
You look in the Talmud or you look in the Torah, even in the prophets, you don't find chief rabbis. You find prophets. You find
Chachamim.
The idea of a chief rabbi is that the non-Jewish power or state wanted always. We don't want to deal with every Jew. With 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So we need 1 Jew to talk to. So we need a chief rabbi.
This is also interesting what you're saying. What do you understand of what's going on in Putin's head? Why is he doing this war? Is this Putin's war? Is this Russians' war? What's happening?
You want me to say something about a person I only met twice in my life?
Not him, but why are they doing this war? Why is Russia doing this war against Ukraine?
Before the war, there was always a question, will there be a war? Will there not be a war? And many of my friends and people I knew from the diplomatic world, from the world of politicians in Moscow, who needs Ukraine? But why do we need this? But if you study the history of authoritarianism, you're going to see that in a democracy, leaders have to stay popular. So to stay popular, you have 2 ways. Either because you have elections, but also in a non-democratic system, you have to stay popular. Because if you're not popular, the only way to maintain control is by becoming more and more aggressive and more and more forceful. So how do you maintain your popularity? It is either by making the life of every citizen better, or it is by recreating the dream of the past of an empire. So the decision was taken in 2014 when Russia went into Crimea, and you had this millions of people who were applauding and were happy. Oh, Crimea is again part of Russia. But did the life of any Russian citizen become better with it? So that's the path which has been taken since 2014. And I would say something else. I don't know if people in the West know that. Since 2014, a majority of Jewish businessmen started to leave Russia. They said this is not going to end well. And you had a whole exodus of Russian Jewish business from Moscow. And today you find them all over the world, in London, in Israel, in the West. And this process started 2014 and continued in 2022.
Do you have a message for the French Jews?
I was yesterday part of a wonderful event, the inauguration of this new community center in Levallois, just in the outskirts of Paris. You know, after being a European Jew, being the president of the Conference of European Rabbis, when we have lived through Charlie Hebdo and before that attack in Toulouse, and then Baklatan, and you know, in Nice, and basically there was such fear that this is already, we're coming to the end of the long history of French Jewry, of Judaism in France. And basically it was, you know, like in Israel they used to say in the 1950s, you know,
right,
let the last person not forget to turn off the light. And today, when I drive through Paris, and you see this, first of all, this beautiful new European Center of Judaism, which was built. And now, yesterday, the opening of this center in Levallois, this is a real, not a sign, investment, in a sign of hope, and a sign of we are not only in present, because people, I had a friend who died not a long time ago, Serge Schweigenbaum, who was the director of the European Jewish Congress, who always said, you know, there may be a nice Judaism in France, but there's no future. At the moment you start building new centers for dozens of millions of euros, this is a sign that you see the future here, and this is a change. The world does not know that. The world still thinks that every Jew in France is sitting on their suitcases and just waiting to leave to Israel or to London, everywhere. But I have another message which I would like to give to my French sisters and brothers here. You know, in history, we had many Jewish communities who thrived and lived through non-democratic system, you know, monarchies, and there were no democracies till the French Revolution, right? However, if we look today, we see that when we have a non-democratic system, this is not only a danger internally, this is a danger for externally and for the whole world. So what I would like to try to tell me that here in France, there are also forces which are trying to destroy this democratic system from within. And young people don't remember World War II. We don't remember what it means to live in a system where you cannot rely, you cannot be certain that there are human rights and there are minority rights and there are freedom of speech, freedom of religion. It is not how do you say in French? Par hasard. It's not that it is the far right movements all over Europe, in Austria, which are fighting shchita and milah. Okay, maybe their first aim is that the new Europeans will come from the Middle East, but we Jews, we are the collateral damage. So we should never underestimate the importance of democratic system, even though it's, you know, we used to say the good thing about an autocratic system, that you only have to convince one person not to be an anti-Semite. In a democratic system, you have to convince everyone not to be an anti-Semite. Yes, sometimes it's much more difficult to live in a democratic society, more challenges. However, never underestimate the importance of living in a democratic society.
So I have a last question, which was actually my first question. You're a Swiss Jew. Originally, you were born and raised in Zurich, which is the democratic system in Europe. How come you left for Russia?
It was the challenge of creating a community in a place where for 70 years the state destroyed any kind of Jewish expression. And with God's help and thanks, and this was my message to the community when I announced that I'm resigning, is that I thank God that my wife and myself were able to be part of this historic, important Jewish renaissance in Eastern Europe and Russia during the last 30 years. And this renaissance is not going anywhere. The Jews, when I came to Moscow, there were 1 million Jews in Moscow. Today, there may be 100, 110,000. Maybe after it was a big aliyah in the last 6 months, maybe even less. Mm-hmm. But all those people we touched, we helped, we moved. They exist, they continue to live in Israel, in the United States, in Germany, and everywhere else. And the main thing was to reconnect those 3 million Jews, the silent Jews of the Soviet Union, with the rest of the Jewish people.
Am Yisrael Chai.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rabbi Pinchas Goldschmidt. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.